Hello and welcome. Today we are joined by Danish Zahoor, who's an academician and an author at Geopolitics magazine, which is based in New York. Now, his areas of interest and focus are generally diplomacy, power conflict, and energy. Today we'll be talking about his article on the Westphalia Treaty. Now, this generally talks about how non-state actors are undermining the role of the Westphalia international system that we've known since 1648. Now, my very first question to you is that how did European nations become a model of international system?
Okay, so basically the groundwork was set in the very ancient times. The European nations had the preemptive advantage of a well-established political thought, something that we did not have in our part of the world. And if we did it, we did not really do a great job recording it. I mean, the Eastern societies are not known for a great sense of history. All the travelers that came to the Eastern societies, even in the medieval times, did not really find a lot of great deal of historical sources, philosophy, political thought. But that is something that was there in the West right from the beginning. The Western civilization is based on the Greek political thought, ideas of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, all of these important political philosophers in very ancient times. The modern societies, the medieval societies of Europe, kept drawing from these ideas. And I think that is one of the most important aspects of the modern nation states, the biggest advantage that the European societies had as compared to the kind of societies that we have, the Eastern and the rest of the world. And in fact, the idea of the modern nation states only came to our part of the world once the colonial system started receding, from this part of the world. The ideas were brought by the British, the French, the Portuguese to this part of the world. And once they started receding as late as the 20th century, that is when the ideas of nation state actually started, inoculating our societies. So yeah, clear advantage to the European nations, and therefore they were obviously the model modern nation states for the rest of the world.
Right. Another aspect that you've highlighted a lot in your article is the role of the MNC. So my second question to you would be that why do you think it would be interesting to see if business leaders of MNCs would ever switch their jobs with the premiers of the nations worldwide? Right. How significant do you think this would be?
I have used a very simple line in the article, and I said it's not just power, but also the anticipation of power that makes a difference. When it comes to the decision making by leaders, it's also the anticipation of power. The fact that all of these very top level leaders do acknowledge the fact that probably the forces of economy and therefore the forces of the politics are flowing through their organizations. They are better organized as compared to the states. They are more efficient. The reason that they are paying their employees a much fatter amount of money every month as compared to the governments across the world tells us a great deal about the emerging pattern. The fact that they have probably a greater control of the economic resources. Karl Marx has given sleepless nights to liberals across the world, but his idea about economy being the fundamental basis, the very bedrock of societies globally, is very profound. He talks about eventual withering away of the state, but ironically, it might just happen. And many of these world leaders anticipate the fact that that it might happen in a way where in a diametrically opposite way that Karl Marx probably had predicted. So yeah, these guys are very smart. I think the days of Roosevelt, Churchill's, and all of these people are over. Now we have people like Donald Trump at the helm of affairs when it comes to being the so-called statesman. We do not really have the statesmen of the good old days. We have, on the other hand, in the corporate world, we have people like extremely smart people, extremely smart elite leadership, and I think the pattern is quite visible. I might be a little subjective or politically incorrect, but I think as an academician, I can afford to take that risk.
Right. Now, while we are on the topic of MNCs, my third question to you again would be on the MNCs which are rising in the world today. Now, what is the significance of MNCs taking control of huge amount of Earth's resources? Like you just mentioned, that the MNCs have a lot of resources, they pay fat packages to the employees. So what is the significance of the MNCs taking control of a major amount, a colossal amount of the Earth's resources?
So basically, what really is, how does the economy of a society operate? As a society, you just have, a society is basically a haphazard, has a haphazard economic energy, if I can put it that way. What is the role of a well-organized structure that we now call a state, a nation, or a bureaucratic structure? It is to just sit on top of that society, which has haphazard economic energy, and channelize all of those resources, the economic resources, in a way that we can, develop that particular society, send something back, process the economic resources in such a way that we can actually develop the society, invest in the welfare of the people. But if there is a competing force which is better organized and more efficient as compared to the state, what's the role left for the states now? I mean, the states will be clearly undermined. There's a very stiff competition coming in from the MNCs. And make no mistake about the fact that they are really controlling a huge chunk of the resources. Like I said already, clear indication is the fact that they probably are bigger employers today globally. They're paying their employees much bigger, amounts of money as compared to the governments across the world. And they are taking control of especially the Western liberal societies. Maybe we are just, as a country steeped in socialist, legacy, we still are not able to feel the effect. But in the Western liberal world, we are already seeing we are already having debates around the fact that probably MNCs are taking greater control of the resources. There is just one thing that separates, the society from the state, and that's just organization, the skill of organizing itself. The state is able to organize in a way that it is able to use the resources of the society, the economy of the society. But if there is a force that is able to better organize, I think the state will clearly be undermined.
Right. Now that we've hit the topic of states, my another question to you would be that why is it so important? Why was it so important to divide power between the state and the church back then? What significance does it hold?
The Treaty of Westphalia essentially carves out clear spheres of influences, clear spheres of powers, so to say, between nation states at that point of time, the incipient, the emerging nation states at that point of time, and the church structure. Church was, by the way, a very important power player at that point of time. And the fact that Westphalian Treaty carves out special spheres of influences and power for all of these organizations, it was in a way the beginning of the secular world as we know it today. The church is given its own sphere of influence to operate in, while as the secular states are given, the kingdoms of that earlier, of those early years are given a separate sphere of influence to operate in. This is important. Why? Because until then, until the Westphalian Treaty of 1648, throughout the medieval times, which we also, by the way, know as the Dark Ages, the church had a huge role to play. The religion had a huge role to play in the politics of Europe, which really complicated and really, involved a lot of violence, a lot of bloodshed. We had the Crusades, by the way, and the church had the power to basically get the public rally around itself and send them into battles, probably during the Crusades or other holy wars, as we had in the Middle Ages. And therefore, the whole political scenario of Europe in the Middle Ages was extremely complex, was made even more complicated. The church added even more layers to the complexity of the European societies in the Middle Ages. Once the Treaty of Westphalia happened, we had clear-cut boundaries between the church and the state, and that was the beginning of the secular world as we know it today. Mind you, these were not democracies as we know them today. These were still, autocracies mostly, by and large. These were kingships at that point of time, but these were still the beginnings of the early, the nation state system as we know it today.
Right. Now, again, in your article, you mentioned about the modern state system. Now, as far as I could decipher, modern state system is something which is a system which is dominated by in a country which has one religion or one culture. Now, a modern state system, how relevant would that be in a country which is an amalgamation of various cultures and various religions? Don't you think that this would just go against the ethos of democracy if a modern state system is inculcated in today's time?
The modern state system at this point of time, when we talk about the Westphalian Treaty, the basis, because the church was out of the picture, the Holy Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Church was out of the picture. So what was the binding force that was left? The presumption was that it is going to be common history, it is going to be a common culture, language. All of these forces could play an important role in making sure, either these could be a good cementing force, to make sure the public rallies around a flag. There is better understanding when you're compartmentalized as a nation state with people of your own cultural, historical, and linguistic background. It is very likely the state structure is more stable. What happens now, like you asked, what happens today when we have an amalgamation of a lot of cultures, different cultures, like in India?
Right.
There's a huge likelihood of intra-state conflict, as we see across the world. We see it happening in China with the Uyghur Muslims and the general Han Chinese population. We see it happening in in Turkey with the Kurds. We see it happening in India to a fair amount, to a fair extent, and because of diverse cultural groups. I think the way out would, in my opinion, would be a more loosely arranged confederacy, especially in countries which have a rich diversity of culture, like India. A loose confederacy which gives ample amount of autonomy for expression of political aspirations for all of these smaller nationalities, so to say, not really nations in themselves, but because of because these provinces belong to people of different ethnic, cultural, linguistic groups. Fair amount of autonomy would be the way forward. Otherwise, I think the very basic presumption during the Westphalian Treaty, I think it still holds good in many ways. It still continues to hold good. It gave us a prediction about conflicts arising intrastate within the state because of different diversity of because of the diversity of cultures and linguistic groups. I think it still holds good, and we have to base our arguments as we go forward in our discourse, in our national discourse, bases these presumptions that were given to us through the Westphalian Treaty.
Right. Now, my last question to you would be that you've mentioned about transnational outfits like ISIS and Al Qaeda, and you said that they can also withhold nations, just like the MNCs. You said that transnational MNCs both have equal amount of a doorway to probably withhold a nation. Now, you also give an example of what happened in Afghanistan, wherein after 20 years of war, US backed out of Afghanistan because Taliban took control of it. Now, don't you think, I mean, this is a live example of how transnational outfits have taken control of nation, like what we've seen in Afghanistan, like you've mentioned. But don't you think this would go against the whole basis of your Westphalia Treaty and against democracy?
Yes. The reason I mentioned Afghanistan was because it was very recent in our memories. What really happened was there was a transnational group or a non-state actor that was able to organize. Like I said, organization is the most important aspect here. That was able to organize itself better than a well-established state structure, than a well-established military structure of 20 years. A non-state actor organizing itself better, and the state structure collapses under the assault. So again, the difference is just about the way these actors, non-state actors, are organized. If they're able to organize better than your state structures, we are done for. Similarly, what happened when ISIS actually spread through the Middle East, the first thing they did was that they captured the oil resources. What exactly they were trying to do was they were trying to organize themselves around an economy, around a resource, and it became a consistent source of income for them. A lot of European Union countries actually imported oil from ISIS during those years. So the whole point is, if there is any non-state actor which is able to better organize itself as compared to a state actor, it is going to create a lot of chaos. It is going to create a lot of trouble. in the established nation state system, in the established Westphalian system that we have known so far. Remember, the most important force that propels these transnational groups is the force of ideology, is a specific worldview.
Right.
When you say that they are endangering democracy, yes, they are. Why? Because they operate on by selling a certain ideology, a worldview, and they will never allow a competing worldview to come close and try and undermine their worldview, which goes against the very basic ethos of democracy. Democracy thrives on the fact that you actually have a fair amount of different ideas.
Right.
But here, what is happening is, just because of the fact that these guys are thriving off of an ideology, they will never allow an opposing worldview that would compete with their own established ideology. Similarly, when MNCs take control, another non-state actors, I think non-state actors has been used in a very narrow sense so far, but I have tried in my article, I have tried to put a deliberate effort to widen the scope, to widen the definition, so to say. And I have also included the multinational companies. They are also non-state actors, very important ones for us to consider. So when a non-state actor like a multinational company operates and takes control of resources, again, the democracy will be undermined. Why? Because these are propelled, just like ideology propels, the transnational outfits, profiteering propels multinational companies. They operate on the basis of profit. And profit, they have this entire cost benefit analysis. It may not go, hand in hand with what is required for the development of the state, for the welfare of the state, as we have seen in our socialistic traditions here in India. So imagine, Indian Railways trying to become a profiteering agency, trying to become a profiteering corporation. How would that affect the mobility of the masses that it has been catering to for almost a century, more than a century now? So I think, yeah, it will undermine the Westphalian system. It will undermine also the democratic system that we have known so far. So definitely, it is a paradigm shift. I hate to use the overused expression paradigm shift, but that is what it is. Non-state actors are becoming powerful, and we have to be mindful of their growing clout, their growing influence. At this point of time, they might be operating in the back doors, in the behind the scenes, but it is just a matter of time when they will actually come out in the open and give a direct confrontation, give a direct challenge to the state actors, and create a world in the process, create a world which is very different from what we have known since 1648 in Europe and since the 20th century in our part of the world, in India and the rest of the erstwhile colonial world.
Well, thank you so much for enlightening us on the Westphalia Treaty and the growing role of non-state actors.
Thank you so much, Ganesh. It was great talking to you.
Same.